Well, our Monday panel of Press Gallery journalists joins me now. Susan Delacourt is a columnist with the Toronto Star, Joël-Denis Bellavance, the Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Presse, and John Ivison, a columnist with the National Post and Parliamentary Bureau Chief for Post Media. Good to see you all again. Susan, let me start with you. We're seeing the second wave of COVID-19 now, and a big spike in cases in a number of provinces, particularly Ontario and Quebec. The Prime Minister and his government led this pandemic fight when it hit in March. And how good do you feel now about the spirit of cooperation on display between the feds and the provincial governments as we head into this second wave?
Well, we saw this happen about a week ago where the provinces were here in Ottawa, or a lot of them were here in Ottawa, Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and
Alberta.
Alberta, of course. How could I forget Jason Kenney? But they were here on behalf of all the provinces, and that was intentional to say, all right, you guys, we want to make sure that we have a voice in this throne speech and in the post-pandemic or the pandemic second wave planning. I don't know that we're seeing a revival of the national unity conversation that we thought we were going to have before the pandemic hit, but it does seem that provinces are trying to reassert themselves again. Whether Canadians have a lot of tolerance for national unity feuds is another matter. I've been watching, not just because I work for the Toronto Star, I've been watching Doug Ford really closely in this. And Doug Ford seems to be a little more inclined to be more the Ontario broker of the Federation than some of the other provinces. So I'm going to be watching over the next days ahead to see what Ford's tone is on all this.
All right, Joël-Denis, we saw the Bloc leader repeating his demands for an increase in health transfers to the provinces, while Ottawa's accused of interfering in provincial jurisdictions with pandemic responses. Give me your thoughts. How worried should we be about a federal-provincial turf war as the second wave now starts to hit across the country?
I think we should be worried for the following reasons. The provinces feel that the speech from the throne that was delivered last week was totally irrelevant for them because there was no money increased transfer for healthcare, for example. And the premiers made it clear that they're not happy by calling the government, saying that the government was not acting in the proper way in helping provinces face the second wave. So the blame game has started already. And you could see that also the Bloc Québécois, but also the Conservative Party will relay those concerns and grievances of the provinces on the floor of the House of Commons. So the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, Christophe Roulet, will hear a lot about it in the coming days.
And they were hearing some of it in the House again today. John, what are your thoughts on this, and whether we should expect to see and whether we will see a continuing climate of cooperation, or whether cracks are starting to show here?
No, I think cracks are starting to show. I mean, we've got when Justin Trudeau came in, there was an alignment of left-of-centre governments, not all Liberal. There was an NDP government in Alberta, but it allowed him to get things done, such as the climate change framework and the expansion of the CPP. Since then, 12 of 13 premiers have changed in Canada, and you've now got an array of right-of-centre, mainly Conservative governments, from Prince Edward Island to the Rockies, and they are not only resenting what they see as intrusions into provincial jurisdictions, but they're actually aligning together to try and get things done. So, for example, I think it was a missed opportunity when they came to Ottawa to ask for a Canada Health transfer increase, because I don't think there's money on the table to do that. It's just too expensive. But I do think that in areas like, for example, internal trade, we might start to see alignment, certainly between Ontario and Quebec, where Doug Ford and François Legault are in agreement and very pragmatic right-of-centre premiers. I actually think we could see progress in areas like internal trade. They could bypass the federal government.
Yeah, and I guess the thing to watch for, Susan, is whether Canadians want to hear that conversation now, or whether they want to see everybody pulling the same direction during the pandemic. But let me sort of flip a bit to you here. And lots of concern and anxiety as people transition from CERB to EI. For some, it's an easier process than others. The government is now trying to fast-track the new measures through Parliament. How's the government handled this transition, in your view?
Well, like everything with this government, it looks always like it's happening at the last minute. They've had, as many critics have pointed out, they've had quite a while to prepare for this transition. And while you saw the government moving very quickly at the beginning of the pandemic, you see it moving less quickly now. It seems to be falling back into its ways of doing everything, right up to the last minute. So why, after sitting all summer long, after not sitting all summer long, and now being back a couple of days, why the House of Commons suddenly has to vault into, marathon sittings? It does say something about the pace of things.
John, let me ask you for your thoughts on that. How do you think the government's handling all of this?
Well, I think it's slightly concerning that they were so keen to basically jump as high as Jagmeet Singh told them to jump. I'm not sure it works for him particularly either. We can maybe get into that later. But for the Liberal government, it did look very, very reactive. The idea that they were going to suddenly increase the value of the Canada Recovery Benefit and add in these paid holidays. It does look a bit like a government that's kind of at the mercy of every wind.
All right, let me hear you on that, Joël-Denis, and in the context as well as how has Jagmeet Singh played this? First of all, the government handling the transition, and Mr. Singh saying, look, I got what I wanted. I'm prepared to keep the government afloat for now. But he's also making it clear that the government could stay afloat for some time as long as it delivers Jagmeet Singh's agenda. Yeah,
on the first point, I would agree with Susan that the government looks like it's working on it at the last minute. Look, the Prime Minister prorogued Parliament in the beginning of August, and the same week, those changes that we're actually debating, most of them were announced by Chrystia Freeland and Carla Qualtrough, the Minister of Employment and Development. So they were in the machinery for a little while, and now they're
that was back in August when they first announced they were going to do it.
Exactly. So, but they're trying to make changes at the last minute to satisfy the NDP. They should have had those conversations earlier, approach Mr. Singh earlier, so that those changes would have been included in the first draft of the law. So there's catching up to the NDP demand at the last minute just to make sure that they survive the speech from the throne. As for the NDP, I would say the NDP has played its cards very well. They are getting some stuff that they feel that it is necessary to make sure that those who might be still affected by the crisis are not left behind. And so kudos to the NDP. They're trying to secure some key things for some key segment of the population. So they can call it a win for them.
Susan, how's Jagmeet Singh playing all of this?
I actually think he's done not a bad job, but I give the Liberals some credit for that too. I actually see some choreography in all of this. I think the reason it wasn't written into the bill at the outset was because I think Justin Trudeau said, I have no evidence for this, by the way, I'm just speculating, but informed speculation. I think that that Trudeau gave Jagmeet Singh a couple of days to go out and say forcefully what his demands were, always knowing that yes was going to be the answer. And Jagmeet Singh has got what he wanted. I will say the distinction that goes to our previous point that we were talking about is I think Jagmeet Singh has played it correctly in that he's talking about individual Canadians rather than disputes between governments. I think Canadians are keen to hear what people are doing for individuals, but I don't know that if I walked out onto my street right now, that Canadians care too much, or my neighbors would care too much about whether Quebec or federal government is paying for my health care. I just want to know somebody is.
Yeah, probably a good point. John, final word to you here. I mean, should we expect maybe it's not the way the political love affair between Liberals and Democrats to continue well beyond what many of us thought would at the very latest be a likely election in the spring, or are we going to go beyond that?
Well, I think when you look at what Jagmeet Singh has said, it sounds like he could pursue this strategy indefinitely. I mean, my question would be, does he get any credit for this? I mean, do the NDP actually benefit electorally by aligning themselves so closely with the Liberals? I mean, in my experience on Parliament Hill, the NDP do well when the Liberals are not doing well. And it does not strike me that when all this is said and done, Jagmeet Singh is going to come out of it particularly well.
All right. We'll talk again next week. Thank you all for your time tonight. Appreciate it.